Hi, today we're going to be watching an episode called Hermit Harbour, which was filmed down in Looe in Cornwall, southwest Britain, and it was series 16, episode 9. And this was a fantastic episode, actually, divided between two sites, one on an island and one on the coast, investigating early medieval or Celtic sites there. And I'm joined today by the wonderful Stewart Ainsworth. Hi, Stewart.
I've never been described as wonderful before, Dani. Hi.
I'm sure you have. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Looking forward to reminiscing about the coast and the island. Just in that statement, you just brought lots of wonderful memories back of sunshine and coastline and flying around the island in a helicopter, which was wonderful because we had a pilot who loved skimming the water. So not only did we fly around and photograph things and look at things, we were wave hopping as well. It's one of the most wonderful flights I've actually been on that.
It also looks quite exciting travelling between the island and the mainland as well by sea.
It was. I have one fond memory of that little trip across, which doesn't seem far when you look at the map. I've got a map on another screen over here. It's not far in terms of distance, but from Looe Harbour, where we got on the little boat and went out, it took a good half an hour, 3/4 an hour, even that sort of time. But the little boat we went on was flat bottomed. And with the swell and the current and everything, if you've got any kind of propensity towards being seasick, those type of boats make it worse. And there were a number of people on the trips out there who really were feeling a bit queasy, I can assure you. I'm fortunate I don't suffer from seasickness, but plenty of others did.
It's clearly always been like that because there are records of pilgrims travelling out to this chapel on the island and obviously struggling because they would have had to take boats over. But one of your ideas was that actually at certain times it might have been possible to walk it.
That's right. Yes, I think it's one of these things you've got to look at quite carefully when you've got islands which are actually quite physically close to the shore. Today we have a different perspective. Shorelines have changed. Even sea levels have changed since the Roman period. And I know from many other places I've worked where there are causeways which are visible at low tide. And if you know tide and time locally, you can actually walk across, even if you have to do it fairly quickly. And what we tend to do is we only see the landscape we see today. And when you're a landscape archaeologist like I am, what you've always got to do is visualize what that landscape might have been like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, and not make any assumptions about what you see today was exactly the same.
There's an interesting bit in the Wessex Archaeology Report, actually, which was produced after the excavation and is available online as well, actually, for people to see, where it discusses the possibility of, at autumn equinox in September, around sort of somewhere between 21st, 23rd of September, then it's combined with the neap tides. So it's a lot lower. And it would have been exposed around that time for about 6 or 7 days. It would have been a lot lower. And that coincides with Michaelmas, with St. Michael's Day.
That's interesting, isn't it? So you get a coincidence of things. And in the religious world of the 12th century and so on, and back into the Celtic period and even the Roman period, when natural events come together particularly to site of pilgrimage, it would make the experience even more profound, I suspect, for the pilgrims. It does reinforce the importance, I think, of when you look at landscapes. It's sometimes it's about places and understanding places, but often it's about understanding people. And if you want to understand a little piece of landscape that has an attraction, what makes it attractive? Is it seclusion? Is it mystery? Is it practicality? It can be a mixture of all different things together. I mean, that's an important point to remember about archaeology. It's sometimes not just the dirt and the trowels and the diggers and all the rest of it. It's trying to understand what makes a place important.
Yeah. And I guess it's kind of, yeah, how people used the landscape, how they used it and how they saw it and how they were part of it.
I mean, the seclusion offered by that island for religious purposes, as it were, for the whole ethos behind monasticism and seclusion. I mean, it was absolutely perfect for that. It's close enough to the land to be able to get to land for people to get there and to harness resources that might be available at certain times of year. But for the majority of the time, we had that seclusion and quiet that is all part of that religious experience for the monks when they first set up there.
It's quite a journey, isn't it? It's very remote. It's on the southwest peninsula, and then you've got an extra journey on top of that. You've got to get across to the island, so you can see the appeal in people wanting to make that journey, can't you?
You can, and I think one of the important aspects of that site with the chapel on top of it is that it would also be a beacon when you were approaching the coast. It's not just the journey from the mainland to the island. Can you imagine if you sailed from the Mediterranean or from a very long distance to get to the south coast, which we know the Romans did, and navigation beacons were critical to how they navigated the landscape. And that island from outside the coast, it is like a navigation beacon. And that's how navigators knew where they were and how they traded and got to places. So it would have a special meaning for people arriving before they even hit the mainland. And I think it's like a stepping stone in the landscape for generations and generations, even before the monks occupied the site, because as you know, there was evidence of activity there before the monks arrived. I think that's part of the package of the island. It is like a little time capsule.
It's amazing, isn't it? It really is fantastic. And I love that bit where you actually, yeah, you are discussing that enclosure there. Do you want to talk a little bit more about it?
A circuit had been spotted on aerial photographs before we got there, but we had LiDAR, which is, you can map the lumps and bumps from laser scanners in aircraft, but see quite clearly that this actually was quite a good enclosure, just following the contour below the summit of the island. So the chapel almost sat in the middle of it. It wasn't perfectly circular, it was more elliptical, it followed the shape of the island. And when I looked on the ground, lo and behold, there was a bank and ditch cut, and you could follow it pretty much all the way around. There were areas where vegetation was a bit difficult. So once I'd found this feature on the ground and got in tune with it, it potentially had two functions. One was to define an enclosure around a chapel, which is quite common with remote chapels. They have like a defined boundary. The world within it is protected religious space, effectively separated it from the outside world. But also potentially it could have been prehistoric. And so yeah, that became a little bit of a quest for me in a way. Could we find out more potentially about those periods by putting a trench into it, which I managed to be able to persuade the powers that be, usually me, that it was worth putting a trench into the bank and ditch to see what might be there. And it actually was very revealing.
It was, wasn't it? Yeah.
First of all, where did we put the trench? This is another of those sites where geophysics wasn't particularly that helpful. I hope John's not listening. It wasn't particularly helpful because the earthworks of the chapel were very visible to start with, and then the earthworks of this enclosure were visible. So by pure luck, we put a very narrow trench in probably the only place you could do it easily, and within a very short space of time, I think it was Ratchard mainly in that trench, kept coming back and saying, we found another coin. We also found evidence of an earlier ditch potentially in that same trench, which I think takes us back to there being a prehistoric enclosure there first of all. A lovely story to me of continuity there. Really exciting, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, no, it's brilliant. And then, and then continues in use that early medieval period. And then Glastonbury Abbey get excited about it and actually kind of purchase it, don't they? And take it on in the 12th century. So you're talking potentially, good few thousand years of use.
That's right. I think it's not an unusual story, though. I mean, we both know from our professional worlds of archaeology that the story is never simple, is it? You go looking for evidence of two medieval chapels and having a look at the chapels, but you know damn well sometimes as soon as you look at the evidence on the ground with fresh eyes and with the resources we have today, the story can turn on its head in a matter of minutes sometimes. That was the excitement of doing Time Team, wasn't it, really? If you knew what you were going to find before you went there, there'd be no fun in that, would there?
No, absolutely. It's all about discovering, isn't it? I think that's the wonderful thing, it's the process of finding out what's there and to a certain extent not being blinkered. Not kind of going in, it's pointless if you go in already knowing what you're going to find. You've got to sort of go in there and just kind of see what turns up, really.
That's right. I mean, it's like the chapel, when first ventured onto the island, and as you do, you walk straight to the highest point to get a good look round, and pretty much when you got to the highest point, there were the very obvious earthworks of a rectangular building. I mean, you didn't need geophysics, you didn't need LiDAR, it was just there. The shape, the size of it, and we were able to get straight into it, without waiting for lots of geophysics to come back. It was funny because I dug out my notebook. That's the earthwork survey I did very quickly in my notebook. I've got loads of these notebooks for all the years I've worked, and that's the one we used on the programme. And when I looked at it this morning, it is clear. Yeah, it's a rectangular. You see the hashes that we use to represent earthworks. It was I even put on there the trench where I thought we would answer the question. So once you've got the thing started on the chapel, for me, that's like, the reins are off for me. I don't want to go and explore. I want to look what else is going on around the coastline, on the mainland, and so on. Try and piece the bits together as much as possible to tell that longer story.
Why do you think people should particularly watch this one?
Because we need to see the sea and the coastline. Every time I see the sea and the coastline, it just makes me want to be there. But seriously, I think this is worth watching because it is a good example of, to me, that archaeology isn't just about digging. It's not just about geophysics, and it's not just about landscape archaeology. You tend to need to place all the things together to really understand the past. It's about having somebody who understands bones on site, somebody who can tell you about what the religious context was, about the medieval pilgrims and why they went there. It tells a good story, I think, is what I'm trying to say. And sometimes having that whole story, which I think we had there, a nice rounded story, and the scenery was great and everything. It's everything from a religious perspective right through to a good hard-nosed archaeological perspective. It had lots of ingredients in it, which made it a good story through time. That's why I'd recommend anybody to watch it. Telling stories sometimes is really what archaeology is about. Sometimes people think it's about digging. It's not. It's about bringing stories to life, and I think that's a really good story.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure people will enjoy it. Stewart, it's been brilliant catching up with you today. I could talk to you forever. I'm sure people could listen to you forever as well, actually.
What are you trying to say? I rattle on too much.
No, it's just really fascinating. It really is. So, yeah, it's been a real pleasure to be able to catch up with you. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Okay, bye for now.
Take care, Stewart. Bye.
Bye.
I'm at the very start of a fugu, and it might be that there's more of these tunnels and caverns existing on this site. We're going to be here in September, so please join us then and back us on Patreon so we can do more and more work on these wonderful sites.